Welcome to UMath. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Frink. He is a mad scientist, very intelligent, tousled hair, thick glasses, and often wears a white smock. He has a very annoying lilt in his voice. His shortcomings are that he creates inventions that never work properly. Some of his past flubs include constructed robots to protect Mr. Burns that turned violent toward the boss and exploded. He blew up Moe's Tavern while attempting to strike a comet plunging toward Springfield, and accidentally flew a radio-controlled gas-powered plane carrying his own child through a window. So today we are talking time zones. So you've got this map in your answer key. Is that as clear as we can get it? Okay, it's not too bad. So time zones for Canada we're going to focus on. And they're, as you can see from the green lines that have been drawn, they're not exactly what you'd call straight lines, like lines of longitude, which go straight from pole to pole. There's a lot of crookedness and curves and jaggedness to them. So this is the way our country's time zones are set up. Let's start. We'll start on the west coast with us. You can see all of this that I'm highlighting in here, and it would continue down as well through Washington, Oregon, California, into the west coast of Mexico as well. They're all in the same time zone as us. It's called the Pacific Standard Time Zone. Not surprising it's called Pacific because it's right along the edge of the Pacific Ocean and our west coast here. You move east one time zone over, and you can see starting up here, it gets really weird and fat here as it goes into Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. Does not include the Yukon, that's in the Pacific time zone, and then goes into Alberta. Now, I should mention that for half of the year, it's actually a little bit bigger. This line right here that separates Saskatchewan from Alberta, for half the year, it's actually should go down here, this line, to separate Manitoba and Saskatchewan. As it stands right now, the line would be actually here. But for half the year through the winter months and part of spring and part of fall, the line is here. So right now they are actually on the same time zone as Alberta. Okay, so picture the line right here for now, but as soon as we hit the daylight savings in the fall, the line switches over to here. Why is that? Because Saskatchewan doesn't do daylight savings time. They don't flip their clocks forward or behind. They just keep it the same all year. So as a result, this line here flips back and forth every 6 months. Then you move further east to our third time zone. Oh, by the way, this time zone, I didn't mention the name of it, the one that goes through Alberta and the Northwest Territories and part of Nunavut, is called Mountain Standard Time. It's mountain because the edge here, the border, is the Rocky Mountains, so it kind of makes sense they would call it that. Moving east into this time zone, which you can see starts up here and then it gets really skinny over here at this part of Nunavut, goes down and all of Manitoba, part of northern Ontario, and as mentioned already, half the year would include Saskatchewan. Right now it doesn't. It's called the Central Time Zone. Central because it's kind of the center of the country. So that's our third time zone. Our fourth one, continuing on here, which will start up here and go down and include part of Nunavut, will include Quebec, a big hunk of Ontario, includes New Brunswick, Because this is in Eastern Canada, they call it the Eastern Time Zone. Then we move to our next one, which you'll see right up here, and then gets really skinny here, and then goes down, and it doesn't include this. And then this part here. So you've got Nova Scotia, PEI, and because this is on the Atlantic coast, the Atlantic Ocean, they call it the Atlantic Standard Time Zone. Now, the next one, our last one, is really bizarre. It is this one right here. It kind of looks like demented sunglasses, or maybe you see something else here. So it's this. And it's called Newfoundland and Labrador Standard Time. They're on their own time zone. Don't ask me why they didn't just include themselves in the whole Atlantic Standard Time, which would have made more sense to me anyway. But they wanted their own time zone, and not only that, they decided not to go on the hour, but on the half hour. So, but they are Newfies, so they march to the beat of a different drum sometimes. So basically, the way it's set up then is every time you move from one time zone to the next, like from Pacific to Mountain or Mountain to Central, it's 1 hour different. Now, it's going to be later in the day the further east you are. Because if you think about the sun rising in the east and setting on the west, their day starts earlier than ours. So right now it's later in the day in Newfoundland than it is here because their day started earlier than ours did. So from BC, the Pacific time zone, if we moved into this time zone, it's 1 hour later in the day in Mountain. It's 1 hour later in the day in Central here. 1 hour later in the Eastern, 1 hour later in the Atlantic, and get this, a half hour later in this time zone as you keep moving. So let's have a look at this. So this is the way it looks. An hour, an hour, an hour, an hour, and a half hour is the way it works. So let's say I wanted to know, well, how different is the time in, let's say, in Newfoundland and Labrador, actually, let's say in Halifax. So Halifax is in the Atlantic time zone. Let's pretend it's 7 p.m. there right now. What time would it be in Toronto? And Toronto's in the Eastern time zone. Well, you're going from this time zone to this time zone. You're only moving 1 over. So it's 1 hour difference. And because it's always later, more on the east side, it's 1 hour earlier here. So it'd be 6 p.m. If we want to know what time it was in Winnipeg, which is in the central, it would be 5 p.m. And then in Calgary, 4 p.m. We just keep going 1 hour difference. On the west coast here, where we live, be 3 p.m. So you can see quite a difference, a 4 hour difference from Atlantic Canada to us. So to give you some sort of perspective on that, think about things like watching a hockey game on television. Standard times for people to watch games or to start games would be about 7 o'clock. So let's say there's a game taking place in Toronto and it's 7 o'clock in Toronto. Well, if the Canucks are playing Toronto in Toronto and people here want to watch that game, what time is it here? We'll start counting the time zones. 1, 2, 3. It's 3 hours earlier here. So we get to watch games quite a bit earlier than the rest of Canada because our day starts later. So it'd be 4 p.m. here. Well, what time would it be in Halifax? It would be 8 p.m. What time would it be in Newfoundland? Well, it's an extra half hour. So they're starting at 8:30 p.m. So you think about what time their games end, it'd be a lot later. Now, conversely, pretend that you're watching a game that, the Canucks are playing in Calgary. So, and in Calgary, they start their games at 7 p.m. What time would they be watching the game? Let's say there's a big Calgary or a Canucks fan who lives in Newfoundland. Well, then you'd say, what time is it there? You count the time zones, 1, 2, 3, and a half. So 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10:30 p.m. to start watching a game. So what time would that game end? It would end after midnight. So you can imagine. So we have a much better scenario. We can watch games to their entirety. But if you're a poor soul in Newfoundland, you wouldn't get to watch a lot of games unless your parents let you stay up till the wee hours of the morning. So, sample question here. It's 3:30 in Winnipeg. What time is it in Vancouver? Well, Winnipeg, and you can check these out on your map too. They're there. Winnipeg is in the central time zone, so it's here. 3:30. To Vancouver, you're going over 2 spots, so it is 1:30 p.m. So it's 2 hours earlier. What about in 2 a.m. in Edmonton? What time would it be in St. John's, Newfoundland? So Edmonton's in the Mountain Standard Time, so 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and then an extra half, that would be 5:30. Not p.m., pardon me, I said a.m. So that's all a.m.s. So, and that's how you do it. You're just counting time zones, counting 1 hour per time zone, except for Newfoundland and Labrador. So, for your actual assignment, it's all in your answer key. It looks like this. So the first thing that you have to do is actually fill in the names of the time zones. So Pacific Mountain, Central, Eastern Atlantic, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And then you start doing the questions for it. There is a map in your answer key as well to help you, like when you get to questions like this, like, oh, well, where is Edmonton's standard time? And you just look on the map and you'll find it. Okay, so it's 2 pages. There's also an answer key that comes right after it that looks like this. It's got it all. So make sure you do that complete page, both sides. It's actually a fairly short lesson overall.
That was easy.